All right.
Good afternoon. I'd like to welcome you to our CRA meeting for this July the 1st. At this time, I'll call this meeting to order. And could we all please stand for our Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
It's a beautiful building, isn't it?
Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Chairman Blackwell.
Here.
Member Matheny.
Here.
Member Askew.
Here.
Member Trace.
Here.
Vice Chairman Joel Davis. Member Loading.
I believe Ms. Antoinette Forbes is going to kick our meeting off tonight.
I am Antoinette Forbes, Economic Development Manager. At the last CRA meeting, we spoke about the importance of having a strategic plan so that we can implement our master plan. And so we have engaged the consultant firm RMA, which stands for Redevelopment Management Associates. They are considered the guru of all things that are CRA, particularly in Florida. I won't say how many years of experience they have, but it's a lot. So they are going to lead off this workshop and discussion. The intention is for it to be interactive, so if there's parts during it that you would like for them to ask them questions or like for further discussion, they will do that at that time. So I'm going to introduce Kim Braymaster. If I said it wrong, I'm certain she will correct me, who is the president of RMA.
Thank you, Antoinette. Good evening, Mayor, Commissioners, City Attorney, City Manager. This is, I think, a very, very important evening, and I would like to, again, compliment you for taking the time out to take your own time during evenings to not only attend CRA board meetings, but do that heavy lifting of the workshops that really make a difference in how well cities and CRA and redevelopment areas implement their plans and programs. So tonight, what Antoinette said is very important. You have plans, but the implementation of a plan sometimes can be overwhelming, and it can be mind-bogglingly where to start. So this is an interactive evening, and hopefully we'll be able to engage in dialogue back and forth so that by the time we're done tonight, but maybe more important, when you have your action plan, it's not the kind of plan that's the big vision that's sitting on the shelf for you to draw on a regular basis. It's day-to-day. It is your day-to-day implementation strategy of the how-to. So just in summary, tonight, really what we're going to try to do is talk about two things. You already have quite a few plans that you've already produced, and the goal is not to tonight rediscuss all those initiatives. We're going to make an assumption that they are in plans, you've approved them, and therefore they're on the board. It's to cull them down and pull out those things that to you, the decision makers, are the top priorities. The second is to make sure that we can fund them. If you can't fund something in a plan, you're not going to do it. So let's decide tonight for your strategic finance plan, what are those initiatives you want to do, and then we will help you figure out how you're going to fund them over a finite period of time. That's the key to implementation, is really making sure that it's fundable over a specific period of time. So what I'm going to do is show you, just for an example, and we'll do this on and off tonight, how this is put to work in other cities and municipalities and how those municipalities have succeeded with it. Then we're going to do also some case studies, and we're going to go through the exact process some city went through to get something done. This is an example. We're going to use one city of 5 pages that are out of their strategic plan. It isn't getting caught up in the words. All of those words from this city had an area called south of the canal. And they knew that they wanted to do certain things south of the canal. They identified those projects and what they were going to look like. They had visuals to them. They knew exactly what it was that they intended to do. And then they put the specific words to those initiatives. And in this particular city's case, there was a streetscape project. They had a public amphitheater. Again, we're not tonight going to get caught up in even the words of your projects. We're going to get focused on those things that have to make it in to the financing document. This is what your financing plan will look like. This is blank. but it's pretty straightforward, and your finance director, and we'll work extensively with your budget folks, your economic development, your city manager, and everyone to take what you're going to do tonight and put the dollars to it. This is what's called a source and a use budget. And what it does to you as CRA board members is it takes all of those words that we just showed you that another city put on paper, it puts them in a source, in other words, where's the money going to come from to fund it, and then it puts it in a use of how are we going to spend it over a very specific period of time. And you can see this one isn't filled in. Yours will be filled in as soon as you make your decisions this evening of what you want to cull down in terms of initiatives that you want to implement over a period of time. So what we're trying to do is get to this point, which is the most important of all, which is what happens during the next 12 months. So you've identified the projects themselves. We're going to pull them out tonight and help you. You know, we have some specific projects we think you have set as priorities. Then we're going to put them on the matrix. We're going to make sure they're fundable and financeable, and then we schedule them out. Those 5 pages are what make up a strategic finance action plan. So tonight, if you send the information to us in a format that we can cull it down, we will set you on that course of implementation. And then when you sit as a CRA board member every month, it isn't a question of what are we going to do, when are we going to do it, how are we going to do it. You've already figured that out. Now, you have to be flexible. Obviously, redevelopment, there is no silver bullet. Things are going to get in your way terribly. Last year, we had COVID. The real estate market could have something happen. We could have inflation. We could have huge impacts with the real estate market. That obviously is something to be flexible with, but as long as you've got very, very detailed implementation strategies, money, and tasks, you'll just adjust to it and you'll move forward. So that summarizes kind of the process that we're going to go through. Now we're going to spend a little bit of time on St. Cloud in particular, and the things that we've extracted from your plans, and/or we had a couple of Zoom meetings, one very, very good Zoom meeting with the city manager and a lot of the folks inside City Hall that actually implement your plans. And they really provided tremendous input in terms of things that you're already working on, but they also gave some more detailed input as far as what your probably prioritization is. So we've separated your plans or these strategies out of your plans into 2 main areas. Some things are very visionary. Some of your plans have very high level plans, goals, et cetera. Others are more regulatory. Others are things like streetscapes or sidewalks, or you have a stormwater plan or a traffic plan. You want to separate those because, again, what we're going to focus on heavily is money. Remember right now, even at the federal level, there is a phenomenal amount of money that's going to start to move through our system. There are all kinds of sources of revenue, but they're going to be divided up depending on whether or not it's something that you can access because it's regulatory coming from the federal, state, or local government, or whether it's visionary and you'll need to find the money at the local level. When you're dealing with implementation, we need to know that. We need to figure that out in advance, and we need to put the money into one of these 2 pots. So we will always try to separate those 2 kind of initiatives. We just put this out here not to repeat the things that are in your plans. We put the things out here in this PowerPoint tonight to just reaffirm that you've done a tremendous amount of work in terms of laying the groundwork for implementation. In our humble opinion, you don't need to do really any more planning. You've got almost every asset that you could have as a city, you've got it covered. You've already planned it. Everything from the waterfront, you have your Neo City, which is even outside, but it's within and it's going to impact you. All of the plans that we were given by city staff really do incorporate all of the heavy lifting from an economic development standpoint. So we want to make sure that we didn't miss anything and that there weren't any additional initiatives or plans that you needed to undertake. We also recognize that we're supposed to be focused on the CRA. That said, no CRA can completely redevelop itself without looking outside, because a lot of those things that you're going to try to sell yourself as a downtown and as a redevelopment area are going to come from outside, obviously. It starts internationally and it works its way in. But what we want to do is ultimately make sure that we're sending out strong messages and clear vision messages of what's going to happen in a particular area. So our hyper-focus for this initiative is the CRA district, again, recognizing that you've got a lot of initiatives that are going to really make a difference of how people feel about you, not as a downtown, but as a city. And as far as your assets go, when we go into cities and we look at the redevelopment initiatives and we look at some of the big obstacles and things that are in their way and the assets that they have, you all are in such a good position because you have a few things that make or break whether you'll be successful. And I don't remember if you remember during the Zoom that we had a couple months ago, your stars are lining up and you've got everything lined up to do what you need to do. Number one, you've got the economy on your side today, which is good. You do have a vision. You've already got all of those visions laid out for you. You have leaders, and you have very, very good leadership. That is not always the case in some cities. If you don't have that right leadership and a strong manager and a strong elected body, et cetera, you're going to struggle. You have a good team. You have an incredibly talented team inside City Hall, and then you have the ability to do what you're doing now, which is put it into implementation. So this section moves to that stage. These are the words that'll end up in your strategic finance plan based on the projects that you've identified. We can move these tonight. We can call them something different. We didn't make these terms up. We used them out of your own plans. We helped categorize them so that you can refer to them because, again, it's all about the money. We have to find the money to do certain things, and these categories respond to money in different ways. So we'll go through these one at a time. This presentation, it's not so much a presentation of me talking as much as it is from here forward. I will put the concepts out that we've pulled out of your plans, and then we want to talk through them, and it's either a go or a no-go. It's going to stay in the plan or it's not, and or there might be questions about it. And some of this stuff is heavy lifting. Some of it's complicated, it's complex. It can be anything from a bond issue to how to acquire a property, how to negotiate a development agreement. Those kind of things we can talk through as much as you'd like tonight, but I would like to offer up, if there's any subject that comes up tonight that you say, you know, I think I get this concept, but I've got to understand this more. Our team, myself, we are more than happy to have one-on-one conversations as follow-ups and just say, that, I would like you to call me back. I have to learn more about this. I have to understand this better because it's important. And again, I've just put that out there because some of this dialogue is detailed. So let's start with the first one. And the first one, of course, we put the heavy lifting up front because we're at the beginning of the meeting, is you have land acquisition and you have public-private partnerships. What are public-private partnerships? As a city, and especially as a CRA, the most valuable tool you have is the ability to use your own land to generate new taxes to create a stronger tax base for economic development. There's no more powerful tool that you have as an agency than that. We know you've purchased property in the past. We know you've had some success and maybe even some opportunities to do other things. But what we would like you to consider is land acquisition and the land that you already own and the land that you might want to buy, that if there's ever a silver bullet to you moving quickly and having an impact on your tax base, it's with your own land. The second is through land somebody else owns that you want to try to repurpose. And it isn't just a question of what's it cost. It is far more complicated than that, and we'll talk through that in a second. So all of these plans, and we went through them all, have some kind of discussion about redevelopment somewhere. We pulled them out, and we're looking for that land that's going to have an economic development impact. So let me give you an example. If you decide you want to buy a parcel of land, and you might start off with, well, some consultant came in and said, well, you should put a P3 here, or a hotel could go there, or you could have a mixed-use project there. Here are the kind of things that you could consider in terms of a P3, a public-private partnership, as opposed to just, what's the appraisal, should I buy it, or shouldn't I? It's far more detailed than that. Here was a parcel of land that another city owned, and they had a couple public uses on it. It was positioned nicely because it was close to the water, but it was just a surface parking lot. What a proposal came in was for a quote-unquote fishing village, very laid back, very casual, but based on that city's brand and their image, and you can look around, you see it's just not very attractive. The proposal that came in was not stellar. It wasn't great. My first suggestion and recommendation to you as a city, don't settle. You have such good assets lined up right now. You have so many good things going for you. Anybody can walk through City Hall and say, I want to open this business, or I'm going to do this. If you set your goals high and you own land like this, you have the ability to take a proposal like this that, yeah, it's great. They're going to put a few restaurants and they're going to do some good things. But you have the ability, if you negotiate the terms correctly and effectively, you have the ability to change the course of where the city will go. That's when you're talking about land, purchasing and developing your land, that's what we would like to have this city focus on. This was the proposal that finally got defined after a year of negotiation. And as you can see, it was not anything like what they had originally proposed. It wasn't just a little restaurant with a few cafe tables. It was a substantial garage, a public garage. It was a hotel, and it was 3 different parcels made up of about 7,000 to 8,000 square feet of retail each. But it didn't start out that way. It started out with the city recognizing that their land and that particular site was going to set the stage for what happened in the surrounding area. These are the projects that got built, not the one from the image that I showed you before. So when we're looking at your land and we're looking at what can happen on that land, we shouldn't just say, well, if I buy it and it costs $1 million or $2 million or $5 million, whatever it is, what's going to go there? You want to make sure that you've gone through that financial analysis to get something higher quality, higher value, higher everything built, as opposed to lower. This one obviously spurred so much additional spin-off development, but you can notice the quality that came along with it. So it all starts in the beginning, and this was a hotel, obviously, that just opened up. This all started off with what the land was envisioned as, what the developer proposed, versus what ended up happening. This is built now. This isn't a maybe it'll happen. It did happen. Another thing was the parking revenue. The city didn't know whether they should build the garage or the developer should build the garage. You will be in this same situation because you have a downtown. And ultimately, you have to deal with parking. So you have your studies and your parking consultants say you need X number of spaces, and the more retail you bring in and restaurants, the more parking you need. That's part of it. That's the first step. But then what? Where does it go? How are you going to pay for it? And what should it look like? In this particular case, that analysis was so detailed that we knew as the government, we not only had to build the garage, we had to put a garage that was unlike any other government garage. This had to act as a pillar of public investment that would spur private investment. And it changed the parking revenues dramatically. So you can see they went from $800,000 in 2012 to $2.8 million. In this case, we helped the city form a parking enterprise fund. So we took the money out of, actually the police department was collecting it. We took the money out of the police department's fund, set up a city parking enterprise fund, and now all of the parking revenue goes into the enterprise fund that does what? It's bonded and it builds more garages. So it's all about the money. At the end of the day, whatever you do with land and development goes back to the money, and however we set up the financial plan spurs more development. So there's an example of it wasn't even just about the land, now it's about the land and parking money. Rent was huge. We went from a few $100,000 to $600,000 per year. That's not even, and this is about 2-3 months old, that's not even counting the percentage rent that's going to come in from this particular deal. And then the $48 million in city revenues during the course of the years, it more than tenfold has paid off the public infrastructure. So I take time to go through that because what started off as a piece of land went deeper and deeper into financial considerations that need to be part of the discussion. If you don't have someone at the table having that kind of dialogue with you when you're buying land, you need to. It has to happen, otherwise you'll miss opportunities. So I take you through that discussion because you have land. We circled just 2 little pieces that are near your downtown and near your city hall. But the first thing we do when we're looking at these kind of strategic finance plans is we ask you, tell us where you think that prime parcel of land or series of land or all of them are, and we will help you figure out not only what to do with them, we'll put them in the right order and figure out what should go on them and then help you implement them. That's what's going to end up in this particular plan. So we know how many of them are here. You can look just from this aerial. You've got 3 things. You've got assemblage, which everybody loves assemblages. Why? Because you can do bigger projects on them. They're easier to park, and they have a bigger impact. The other thing you have is a lot of infill. Anytime you look at an area like this and you see vacant lot, that means we're losing money as the government. We can't lose money. Vacant land is losing money to us. So we want to have something on it. It can be a single-family home, a townhome, a mixed-use project, or something. But our number one goal in this plan should be to not have that vacant land, unless we want to put green grass on it and we want it to be a park, or something green. But vacant surface lots are not what we want to have. So what we're trying to do in this plan is target them. We pulled this out of your Renaissance plan. Your Renaissance plan, we understand, is acting as your CRA plan, which is fine. What we want to do is make sure that the things that are in this CRA plan, because that's the only ability you have to spend money, if it's not in the plan, you can't do it, are those still the things you want to do? These are the 3 things in that plan in your downtown that are tied to what I just talked about, that we would like to see you pull forward and start to implement. I can't even read them, they're too far away, but they're in your document. But basically it's saying create that inventory of that land, and let's get that inventory. This one tells you to create it, but we want to do that now. We want to get that public-private development targeted, and then we want to make sure that we're going out and telling the world that we've got this land. Everybody wants land. Right now, there's so much money on the streets in the United States of America from developers, business owners, investors, et cetera. The goal is to get them to come here and open the business here, build the buildings here, et cetera. If we do these 3 things and we put them in this implementation plan, then we're doing business. Then we're sitting at the table and we're ready to have not only the invitation to come, but we're prepared to do business because we can tell them, here's what we own, here's what we want on it, here's what we're willing to do as the government, and we already know how we're going to fund and finance it because we just went through that story. So this is the last part of what we would be doing associated with this land, is you have to tell people about it. There's a lot of forums where you can tell people, and the people can be anybody, like I said, from a small business to a large developer. The forums that you find these folks at are varied. One of them is the International Council of Shopping Centers right in Orlando. They have an annual meeting in August, and the bottom right slide was, I think we took the city of Lauderhill, and we sometimes represent cities if they don't have the resources to go. But you want to have the materials, the collaterals, the marketing pieces. Once you've identified and you've got those parcels of land and you're ready to sit across the table from someone, then you prepare your marketing materials and you go to this conference. There's one in August. It's possible you could make it, not likely, but next year the city of St. Cloud should be at ICSC talking about the kind of development parcels they have, and you'd have a booth like that, and now you're out there dialoguing with the private sector about opening a business. Leasing packages are just that. They're materials that you have set up that literally talk about what it is that you have. So I'm going to stop there for just 1 second because now I'm going to get into the money side of a P3 and talk through how that happened. Is there anything associated with what we just talked about that we need to go into more detail on, or that I need to go back and revisit? Are we good so far? Keep going? Okay. Okay, now the money side of a P3. And again, this is the heaviest lifting part of this whole topic today, because really CRAs are in the real estate business, but it isn't just about land again. So here's another parcel where there are 7 different pieces of land. The developer identified each one of those parcels and what they were worth. So we knew that parcel 1, and we knew the folio number, we knew everything about this land. We knew what it was assessed at, et cetera. Ultimately, it was about $3 million worth of land. The developer came and said, I can't build this thing. The market's not there. You're trying to get me to come into a somewhat blighted area. I can't build this $70 million project and cash flow it. And we really want to come in, CRA, we want to help you do your thing, but the numbers just don't work. They had done some preliminary concept designs. It was absolutely stunning. But bottom line was, as much as we liked the project, we liked what it was, we knew the number of units, we knew what they were going to build, they couldn't fund and finance the project. They had a $5 million gap. That's a lot of money, a tremendous amount of money. So we looked at their development pro forma, and we ran everything from their construction numbers. We knew that it was about a it's now $70 million project. We knew more or less what their overage could be if things changed. Like right now we're watching lumber go up and the prices of raw materials are flying all over the place. So we had some contingencies in there. And then we knew that with their rate of return that their gap was going to grow every day, which of course it did. Well, their return on cost was going to be 6%. There was no way the developer was going to build that with a 6% return. They can't take that risk, even if they found a lender or some kind of equity or mezzanine financing to fund it, they weren't going to take the risk. So here's the important part as a city and a CRA. This is a lot of numbers, but really all you need to focus on is this. If they had a $7 million gap, it started off as 5, the project got bigger, the TIF got bigger. If they had a $5 million gap, and we knew that we had to give them that money over time, not up front. They were going to build the project first. They were going to put up that $70 million. In year one, the top line, even at a taxable value of $53 million, we knew that they were going to generate $260,000 worth of TIF. So the question was, if we give them the majority of that tax increment back, what do we have to lose? We have to get to $5 million. Obviously, they need to fill that gap. But what are we going to end up with? We're going to end up with a project, a $70 million project, 250 more people living in our downtown, which this is a fairly dense downtown. We wanted more of it. And you can see the project. It was a large project. But we knew that the payback to them was really a payback to us as a city. And it turns out that it is only going to take about 7 or 8 years to get that money funded back for this project to be whole. So in terms of using the taxes from a new project and putting it back in to help fund and finance it, that's a very, very powerful tool that you have as the CRA. You have so much land in your CRA, we would suggest that when you do your analysis on whether or not to enter into some kind of a public-private partnership, you go through this same kind of an analysis. Because even though you might pay more for land up front, or you might have to give some of the new taxes generated from a project back, you are going to financially end up in a much, much, much stronger position. So we've talked through now 2 kinds of public-private partnerships. One, where you are not putting tax money back into a project like we showed you the first one, but you're building a public garage. And this one is where you actually are using that kind of financing tool that you have to fund and finance these deals. That's a complex part of this statute, but it's the most powerful tool you have. You do it in a small way when you do facades. So you'll give a business owner a facade improvement by giving them $20,000 or $30,000 to fix up the facade. That is good. It helps them get open maybe, but something like this will help you generate a much, much stronger base of taxable value because you're creating brand new taxable value. You're not putting something on top of something that exists. You're building new. So in this particular case for you, and these are your initiatives, you do have property acquisition in your plans. You don't have the development incentives that I just described. You have some. You have facades and you have some incentives. We are suggesting that, and we would work with your city attorney and anyone else, if we have to adjust or tweak your CRA plan, you have the ability to use a tool from the statute in your land acquisition and development that currently is not being used to the capacity you could use it for. So we would like to see in your development incentives that you expand them and you have that ability. And then the other one is P3 opportunities.
Ms. Matheny would like to ask a question.
Thank you. If we were to do this strategy that you was just detailing, do we have to get the county to buy off on doing a strategy like that?
We're actually required to report anything we do in the plan to the county on an annual basis.
Well, I don't mean report it, but would they have to bless it?
I'm not sure. I have to look at that. We would probably, it would actually involve an amendment to the plan, in which case they would be provided for that, and they'd have an opportunity to comment on it. But I don't know, we'd have to look into that issue.
Yeah, I mean, I like that strategy. I think it's interesting. I just, the county blesses our CRA, and then,
Well, you're a charter, it's a charter county, so
Right.
you're only in existence due to the grace of the county.
right. So I just didn't know if they have, a say in whether we do that strategy or not.
Good question.
It's a very good question. Normally, if you're a charter county, as your city attorney said, the governing document and your governing documents that formed you, so you have your resolutions, unless the county took some power away from you at that stage, if they let you form your CRA as a full-fledged CRA, and they let you use the statute, you generally would not have to go back to them for something like this. But that's easily confirmed, and generally counties don't. They don't. But it has to be in your plan for you to do it in the first place. That's the question. Then the leasing packages, we talked about that. That's low-hanging fruit. That's just creating your story and putting in a sharp, sleek thing so that, brochures or whatever it is, so that you can talk to the private sector and hand something out, be professional, be ready when they come to the door. And you've already got some great materials. Your economic development team is sharp. They know exactly, what to do. It's having you all allow these things to go in these documents so that you can do that kind of business. It will have, in this first section of this discussion tonight, nothing will have a larger impact on the redevelopment of your CRA than this topic, because you just have that incredible tool in that statute. It's the most fun thing. It's the most exciting, because you get projects built, and it starts to create synergy, and you get to control it. You don't have to deal with uncontrolled growth. You don't have to worry about anything. You just have to put your goals in place, and then you implement it. So, land acquisition.
Mr. Sturgeon.
Yes, sorry. I have a question about opportunity zones. One, has anybody figured out how we utilize those and how do we leverage that in that process?
Very good question. Excellent question again. Opportunity zones are probably one of the most underutilized federal incentive programs out there, because they are very, very difficult to use. You all know that you have to come and put the money into them, leave them in for 10 years plus if you want to reap the tax benefits. Very few investors that have that degree of investment money are willing to go into smaller redevelopment, unknown areas. The opportunity zones that are doing well are in larger cities, or conversely, they're rural areas. They're out in the middle of nowhere. They're up in more northern Florida, northwestern Florida. They're going in, they're buying massive tracts of land, and they're sitting on them. Those are the two largest uses of opportunity zones today. So it's good you have it, though, because if you start this kind of land acquisition and you start that message, I think you will get on the radar, because then all of a sudden they will see your vision, they'll see that you're in it for the long haul, and then they will start targeting the St. Cloud kind of locales. But it is, unfortunately, a pretty underutilized tool. But it's good you have it. It's very good. And don't be surprised if over the next year or two that the federal government modifies those rules again, because the clock is ticking, and there's not much time left for the investment to really be there and have a tax impact. So I anticipate that they're going to change the rules again and extend the term. So. My suggestion is use it, farm it, and use that tool. But do part one, because that's what they're looking for, is your land. Did I answer your question?
Yes, ma'am. Thank
Okay.
you.
Density and housing. the land leads into this. One of the things that came out when we were talking to your staff is about people and living downtown and your residential. You have a tremendous single-family residential base nearby your downtown. We drove most of your streets. You have such a good grid and fabric of a community that can only get healthier and healthier as your values of your property start to increase. But if there's not enough people living nearby, there isn't enough disposable income to support restaurants and shops and things that need to be supported. So one of the things that you can do when you're looking at your development patterns is gently bringing residential projects into the fold. You don't want to turn into a massively big, dense urban area. But there's ways to have mixed-use projects where there's ground floor active retail and then there's residential either above it. Obviously, you want to have a little bit more density in a downtown than outside of, you don't want to impact your single family. But you've got quite an array of housing here. Your top left is your single families, but the building to the right, that's just two different angles of it. There's a multifamily housing project that with not too much updating could really, I think, have much a better presence. So even your existing housing stock could be invested in through your CRA, and it can have a big impact. A lot of the buildings are getting dated. The older they are, obviously the more upkeep and maintenance they need. So when we're putting this finance plan together, we may want to consider, if nothing else in that core area, we probably want to consider whether or not we want to help upgrade some of these properties, because then they're going to be able to increase their rents a little bit, get different tenants, tenants have more money, tenants spend in the restaurants, et cetera. It's churning that economic cycle. And there has been very little housing built. We ran the economics for this area last week or week before, and it is just incredible how much market demand there is. So if we were to go out and start banging the drums to the private community and letting them know almost every single asset class in residential is open for business here. It could be single-family, townhomes, multifamily, mixed-use, P3s. So it's not like you're saturated and you don't have room for that kind of investment. And this sounds small, but it's almost the broken window theory, that if you drive down a street and the lawns are uncapped and the windows are broken and the facade, the paint is peeling, the roof looks bad, if you put together something small, we call this paint, plant, and pave. It's a couple $1,000s per just the front of the house, and we help some of these single-family homeowners in a very small area. And they have to be homeowners, they have to put in some equity themselves, and. Just a targeted area to help upgrade what is deteriorating conditions for whatever reason. You can't fix every single-family home in your district. You have too many of them. But if there's some targeted streets or areas right in a certain particular area, you might want to consider these smaller programs that have a big impact. They work in some particular cases. And you do have, like I mentioned before, you have a tremendous amount of vacant lots. And those are infill opportunities. Developers and even the smaller builders that just want to do small single-family houses, not the guys that are, not the Lennars of the world and GL Homes, not those guys. You've got a lot of business that could be here. And what that does is it fills in your vacant lots and gives maybe incentives for somebody to go in and put a new single-family home or a townhome. Okay, now we're going to change course a little bit. We've gone over the real estate, we've gone over the financing of real estate, and we've talked about housing and density. That is, I would say, the mother lode of your CRA economic tool. So if we could concentrate on that in your implementation plan, you'll start to see money rolling in faster than you probably could anticipate, because that's how you generate TIF quickly. The next part is connecting it. And the connection comes from your public investments. You've done a really great job with some of your streetscape improvements and projects. They're done well, they look beautiful. When you invest in your public realm like that, it just sets the stage of your private folks coming in. We know you have additional plans to continue with that. And we'd like to encourage that. So when we're looking at this implementation plan, wherever we're hyper-focused on that real estate and land development, we'd like to double down and put some of those public realm places in there. What we didn't see much of in the plans, and I don't think you have to amend your plan to do this, we just have to use the public money for public assets other than just roads, is you don't have a whole lot of focus on plazas and on general gathering spaces and on urban spaces. These are urban spaces that draw the community in. One can be under a beautiful big tree that lights up every night. Another one was that interactive children's water feature, a big public plaza that's got a water feature to it. Something that says this is central. And all great urban places have urban plazas. I'm not talking about a big piece of grass where it's a park. That's not going to do it. To connect an urban environment like in your downtown, you connect it with public spaces like this. So when you're designing your roads and when you're designing your streetscapes, it's almost like the end needs to have some finish to it, and these are the kind of finishes going forward that are going to make a very, very big difference in people gathering and knowing what a particular area is all about. They make a very, very big difference. So these are the things that are already in your plans. You've got your streetscape on Pennsylvania Ave, 10th Street. The complete street on 10th Street, though, is going to be limited, obviously, because you only have so much right-of-way. But again, what's being done is great. Florida Avenue, the Civic Commons is what we just mentioned, as far as having a little bit more of that public connection in that public realm. 192 complete streets, and then alley improvements. So those are ones that could be added. We have 2 left. One of them is special projects. These are things that we pulled out that either the city staff or CRA staff or it's in your plans. It's got real big implications to how you're branded as a city. Obviously, the biggest one that's out there is your waterfront. Anything that says water is obviously a very, very big asset. So even though it's not in the CRA, we focused on 2 or 3 things that are not in your CRA that will impact your CRA. This is one of them. So if there is something about this waterfront master plan that won't necessarily end up in this implementation plan, unless you want to have kind of a sister or a companion document, that is the kind of investment and kind of initiative that will really start to impact and connect between the waterfront and where your downtown is, especially since the connection is there. That north-south connection is so strong. So we were very, very bullish on that. I'm personally even more bullish on this. Anything having to do with industry, and you've already got the hospital, and you've already got, we know the 2, St. Cloud Hospital and the Hospital District talking about having their own master plan. Whatever comes out of that, and if there's any way that St. Cloud can really start to own the development of this master area that's medically based, it's an industry that's going to grow, and it's got so many tentacles that can come off of it. As far as an economic developer and looking at a tool, this is a really big one. So between the waterfront and this, again, this city is just so prime to take care of its own and to grow a job base and an economic base with those two initiatives. So like I said, even though they won't necessarily end up in your CRA implementation plan, how to get these things to move forward is important. And another thing, you have a lot of land. Back to that, the goose who owns the land can lay the golden eggs. You own land in this area. So any place that the city owns land, even if it's a public facility, even if it's an old public works facility, find cheaper land to move the public works locations or the trucks or where you're storing things, et cetera, and go get private development to happen where you've got this kind of a branded redevelopment district. So those 2 we found to be very, very strong. And your city hall, having your city hall anchor downtown, albeit there's not quite that connection yet in the plaza. And city halls are quiet at night. They shut down. So if you have an entertainment district, recognize that this is dark. What can you do to make it not dark? You would change the plaza out front, and you would let the restaurants use that valuable, valuable public space, reconfigured public space, for people. and then all of a sudden, people would be using that space.
Councilmember Matheny.
That plaza's gonna be gone
There you go.
with the building expansion,
Yeah. The whole thing?
pretty much.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and then I would do the same thing. I would suggest if the plaza's gone and it's eaten up, whatever's going to be dark and dead at night, whatever's in front of it when it's designed, is there a way to make it usable? Even if there's a restaurant across the street that ultimately could put sidewalk cafe tables on it, having dead space in a downtown doesn't help. So those are the kind of connection. When we did that thing before where I was talking about connectivity, those were the connectivity things I was talking about. You have to keep that vibrant street life consistent in a downtown, not necessarily anywhere else, but because your city hall's in your downtown, you'd have to do it. Here's an example. You're going to build a garage, we hear. Here's an example of a garage on the left, which is functional, utilitarian, parks cars. And the one on the right is the one that we built in that project I showed you when we first started the presentation. We built a utilitarian garage, but put some absolutely gorgeous sails on it that light up at night, put that pier moniker up there, and we made the ground floor active. Completely changed the day. So when you're thinking about building a garage, wherever you're building it, even if it's a public garage for city hall workers, et cetera, the first reaction would be cost, and it would be to build something like it's on the left. And our suggestion is, back to that public realm and connectivity, that won't help you. We spent $1 million more on just the sales and on the upgrades of that. We got that back tenfold. So it isn't about the cost, it's about that financial analysis of what you're going to generate in revenue to make sure that as you do public investments, you have that dialogue about the private sector money that you can attract because of it. One other thing, special projects that we noticed you didn't have much of in your plans. Culture is really huge. It's huge, obviously, internationally, but even in the United States, cities that have a cultural component to them, they're more vibrant, they're more active, the arts, and it can be any arts, culinary arts, which is food. Everybody loves culinary arts. Look at all the TV shows that deal with culinary arts. Performing arts, visual arts, all kinds of cultural activities can be combined, and when you have multiple uses of them, they make a big difference. In this case, the CRA purchased the building on the top left. You can see what it looked like. There was no ground floor activation, nothing. It was an old hotel from the 1920s, and it was, all those rooms upstairs were hotel rooms. The CRA bought it. We gutted the ground floor, made all the ground floor into gallery space and a little coffee shop. And then upstairs, each little hotel room is where an artist does their work. And you can look in and watch them working, and it's just a cool place to be. And the bottom right, you can see, some of the interior space. So even retrofitting older buildings that have some kind of a cultural element to them can have an incredibly powerful, strong impact. I was driving around today and I saw there was some pottery. It was just in a retail bay, but they were offering pottery. You already have some things here that are culturally oriented, but if you could build those into your downtown vision and plan in a meaningful way, again, the connectivity of that pays off tenfold. The building on the top left was another building in a very blighted district. We renovated that and turned it into a performing arts. It was in an African-American part of the community in Pompano, and turned that into performing arts. And then we started training and offering educational classes. Culture caught on so big in Pompano that the city made the decision to build a cultural center, which is that building in the bottom. And then all of a sudden, the brand of the city started to change. And it just exploded because they started to really recognize that, hey, a city that invests in itself, not only with its upgraded garages and its public realm, et cetera, all of a sudden, the bottom right was the Koi project that located a block outside of downtown, just because of what started off with those small cultural investments. So some things might happen here that you wouldn't even have planned just based on having some cultural added to the mix. So you've got your medical arts campus. We know your parking garage is coming. Our suggestion is to build your cultural arts in. And then the last section is just your generic general downtown. It doesn't fall into any one particular category, but it's that non-brick and mortar kind of activity. It's the things that make people feel good or feel like there's things to do or create excitement. I hear last night you had your market, and it was supposedly just such a phenomenal event. That's what we're talking about with these kind of things. Those things are also phenomenal business attraction components. When you get people down there, and right now downtown's quiet, I'm sure if we walked outside City Hall, it's going to be dark and quiet. But when you start to activate spaces, a business coming from another nearby city could say, oh, I could see opening a business here, green markets, et cetera. And we didn't read your hotel feasibility study. I'm staying overnight. And I, of course, when it was deciding where to stay, I had to go scout around and find out what the hotel inventory was, and it's limited. That hotel feasibility study was very well done. You desperately need more hotel room nights, in your downtown and in your city in general, but they don't have to all be, hotels that aren't conducive to the brand and the character. You have the ability to drive that, but I think you've got probably a pretty big market for the hotel use because you just have such a demand for it. So those are the two additional things in your implementation plan that if we were to suggest a higher priority than maybe what's in the existing documents, we would put those at the very top. The last doesn't have anything to do with any brick and mortar or investment other than telling your story. Cities that tell their story consistently, but in a very meaningful way, tie everything that we just talked about together. And it's everything visual that you do. It can be banners, it can be your signage, it can be public art. It is making sure that people can find you, and once they do find you, you're telling the story of your implementation plan clearly. They know where to find Intranet, they know where to find your economic teams, they know exactly who's going to be approving what, they know what your plans are, but you tell them, and you have that structure in place, and you fund and finance these kind of relatively inexpensive communication tools and initiatives to get that story out there. You do have a lot of murals out there. They're very, they're themed, so I think as long as you keep up that kind of investment in your public buildings and arts, that will go well. And we know that you've got some existing events, your bike tour and those kind of things are fantastic. Build on them, grow them, because it builds community, but it also creates activity. So those kind of things are also very important, a very important part of a non-brick and mortar discussion for a CRA. So we just put these in because we'd like to see them end up in the financing plan and make sure that they have a meaningful investment. Your budget, the next thing that happens if we have captured tonight most of the physical things and we've pulled them out of your plans and we've tightened them up and tried to categorize them in ways that you can implement them, now we're going to turn to the money. We're going to look at where it is, how much it is. We really have had phenomenal success with cities that issue bonds. Bonds aren't scary. They shouldn't be scary. Just like most of us that have a house, we didn't buy it cash. We all have a job, and then we went to the bank, and they gave us a mortgage, and we paid the mortgage off. Cities are no different. Most cities just can't afford to pay cash as you go. You just don't have that much money. It's a little bit penny wise and pound foolish as well, because you're not going to build equity. Just like if you have a house and you're paying the mortgage off, you tend to build equity. If you issue a bond as a city, and you invest in public realm, it has to be a good investment, you will attract private investment. That's building equity in your city. It's building your tax base, and it makes it easier to pay off the bonds. But you should never issue a bond that you can't pay off anyway. We've issued bonds for 30 years, in the last 30 years in the CRA districts and redevelopment we've run. We have never had a bond default. Why? Because you issue the right amount, you make sure that you can cover the debt service. We've gone through 2 recessions and still, even with the drop in real estate values, didn't have a problem paying the bonds back. So it's a tool that you have that is phenomenally useful if you want to go out and invest and then attract private sector money to come in. So even though it's a little sometimes scary for some cities, or they're not comfortable, or they're not sure how it works. Whatever it takes to get that dialogue around the table, to get you comfortable. When you have an ongoing revenue source, just like if you have a job, you have every month you get your paycheck. If you have an ongoing revenue source called a CRA, that's a paycheck. Banks will loan you money, and you use that to pay it off. And then you invest, and you have much quicker impact. And you have money. I can see with the amount of revenue you have and the expenditures you have and what you're doing, you've got the ability to issue, albeit not a huge one, but you have the ability to issue a bond and have some impacts quicker. So that summarizes what our recommendations would be for your strategic finance plan. The next step is tonight, if you have any additional input, or, oh my gosh, you forgot this, you left that out, you didn't bring that into the plan. We have time, it's not going to end tonight, but we really want to make sure that we've captured it all. And then second, we will now start to work on the money side. Now we'll start to put that into that finance plan. We'll make recommendations of how to fund and finance these things. We will not know by the time we write this whether or not grants are available and whether or not we'll get them, but we're sure as heck going to go after them. You want to go after money in many sources, be it federal, state, local, you name it. So we're going to suggest a series of locations that we're going to start to go try to harvest additional money. And then you will review the strategic finance plan. It's the same money. It's your budget. We're not going to fabricate new money, but we'll put it in a budget in a way that it turns into that implementation. So every month when you sit down as a CRA board, you're in implementation mode, month after month, and then you just keep knocking it out until you start to see that revenue grow, and that's what will start to happen. So that summarizes our analysis of your CRA. It's the basis for discussion tonight and going forward. I'd be happy to answer any questions. And like I said, we are available, no question, for any one-on-one phone call. If you want to call up and say, hey, go back to that. I want to talk about that slide more. Or I want to understand the bonds more. Name it. We're here and we're available. So that concludes, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Manager. That concludes our overview, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Do you have any questions? Councilmember Matheny.
I don't have any questions, but I guess, are we going to kind of discuss the options in here? Is that our next step? So, just the ones that jumped out to me that I loved. I mean, I think all the ideas are great. But the paint, plant, and pave program, I thought that was really smart. And then maybe there's a way to kind of focus it, like you were saying, in a few areas. Like, we've redone New York and we're going to do Pennsylvania. Maybe you go a block or two outside of that and start. I mean, I liked that idea. I know on one of the slides you guys had the apartment complex that's on 10th. And that's in a historic district. We just had that building shown to us in like a different context. So I know some of it you were saying like you could update those buildings and do that, but it's in a historic overlay, so I don't know how those talk to each other. But I thought that paint, plant, and pave, I was like, oh, that's, just a little bit. And I think all that stuff also expands, like when the neighbor cleans their house up, then, it makes you want to do it, and, so on and so forth. I loved that reinvesting the tax increment scenario that you did. I thought that was great. The plaza and the urban areas, alleyways, public spaces, I love that too, because it is always, whenever you go into little communities and you have like these little urban moments here and there. I like that. The cultural arts made me think about like 5 years ago at least, Councilmember Askew had said, why don't we start an art fund with the building? I think 0 pieces of art have happened since then. And I know we brought it up a couple years ago, and the staff was going to relook at it because I guess when it had originally been written, it was only focused on downtown. We were talking about expanding it, and I don't know whatever happened with that, but I think we've had 0 pieces of art purchased. So if we could circle back to that. And that was it. I thought they were great ideas. All of them were great. It's always, for me, it's always easy to like, when you see it, you like it. It's hard to kind of create it. So I appreciate the presentation.
Councilmember Trace.
Thank you. great presentation. Just kind of summed up all the different little master plans that we've had over the years. And I do think we need to have other strategies. I think the only big one we have right now is the commercial facade grant, which helps and works, and but the paint, plant, and pave it would be great for some of the residential properties as well to help clean those up. I know every time I drive, I try to take a different street every time I drive through town, different state street, and more and more houses that are getting rehabbed. I mean, it's great. Some of those, you said infill lots. What kind of implementation strategies for ADUs or infill lots? Is it, I guess, is there incentives, or is that, I guess, what strategies have you used in the past?
Yes, if you all want to target that, we would create a series of incentives that would incentivize someone to build as opposed to just leaving their vacant lot. So it can be anything from, same with your taxes. If they're in the CRA, you've got the ability to do the tax increment financing where you give them whatever portion back. Paint, plant, and pave is a very small thing, but $5,000 or $3,000 to a house is a lot. It depends. If you're interested in that, then we'd look at it and we'd recommend an incentive.
Because I know with ADUs, there was the one property you brought up that had 5 different sheds on it almost, right? That were all ADUs and they were all units. Is there a way, maybe in the infill portions of St. Cloud in the grid of, you can't really build a duplex anymore or anything with any density, because if you need 4.5 spaces per unit on a duplex, you need 9 parking spaces on one lot, and it's just more parking spaces than there's house. So I didn't know if that tweaking some of those development standards in the grid to help get a little extra density there, whether it be townhomes or something different. Along with what Ms. Matheny brought up of the historic overlay, is there a CRA incentive we can have as the carrot for some of that historic overlay? We have a lot of kit houses, Sears catalog kit houses in St. Cloud. Maybe just something if someone's going to put money into one of those, a different incentive for that. TIF payback was good. Marketing we always need. Some other public-private partnerships. The school district owns, I think Rossi Jeffries, just that one parcel is 10 acres. So there's some underutilized other government assets that are in St. Cloud. I don't know how big the county's, the library. That's a pretty big piece of property. 2.5 acres, just a big parking lot and an old bank that is a library now. A great library, just other things we can do for some of those. Might not be our government doing the PPP, but it might be one of the other governments around town.
If they'll do it, you'll get tax money.
Yeah. And then have you done any implementation strategies for second-generation shopping centers? We have 2 or 3 on the west end of town, one almost in downtown that just kind of keep on slowly degrading. Is there anything we can do to help pep those up or redevelop? Do you have any strategies in mind for that?
Yeah, 2 things, and malls as we know them are changing, but so are strip centers, et cetera. 2 thoughts, and Adrian, actually she had the challenge where there was one strip center where there were 13 properties, and they were connected in a strip center, 9 different owners. And she managed to get all 9 of them to agree to a themed facade program. And then we helped change the lighting and the whole parking area. So it just completely changed the environment. The retailers started to change out, and instead of an old fish market, we got a really hot restaurant in, and then it started a chain of events. So that's one extreme, where you come up with a very unique incentive just for that particular use. And that's what this is about. You have a problem, you write an incentive, you fix that problem, and then you go do it again. The other is sometimes there's enough out parcels that you can go talk to the property owners, look at your zoning, but see if there's more developable out parcels. Sometimes it can be something small. It could be, a drive-through. It could be just whatever it is on the out parcel. As long as you can park it and or the zoning allows for it, there's usually just higher and better use of the layout of parcels. So each one could be looked at. But you're bringing up really good things that might need more analysis, but let's get them in here if they're, if they're something you want to focus on.
And then something that was mentioned to me the other day of a lot of folks don't know when they enter the city. I know we've always had in here as a gateway strategy, but it's kind of been grandiose. Is there something we can do in the interim of just something we can get done now, kind of on the either end of town, that our CRA extends all the way, kind of to not the city limits extend past that now, but just something kind of anchoring those two ends on 1 and 2. I think that's all mice.
Councilmember Matheny?
Oh, Dave, do you have anything?
Yeah.
You ready to go, Dave?
I already went. Keith made me think of a couple things.
Thanks for the presentation. It was actually very refreshing. I think sometimes when it comes to looking at big properties, commercial properties, taking a loan, being a commercial property person myself, it's a scary time. So I think, are you here to guide us through and walk us through this? Or are you just doing one presentation we're not going to see again? Or are we tying you into something here? Or?
The way that this contract was written is we will help you go all the way through this strategic finance action plan.
Okay.
And I will get everything that we're talking about as far as words and initiatives into the plan. Things that need money, we'll find the money for it, or we'll say it's not funded yet. And then as far as the implementation, the way it's worded is that we're going to be available on an hourly basis as you need us. That's up to you. You know, I can give you this document and then your staff implements. Very often we stay and help cities on an as-needed basis to guide them, and that's built in that we could be here for you hourly if you would like.
Okay, well, the way I'm saying refreshing, I'm not a very complimenting person, but been dealing with CRAs, I think, 12 years now, thanks to Paula Stark back there. And you're probably the first person that actually came up here and is making some sense in putting everything together from P3s to the whole thing. I think sometimes we get a little bit lost when we're going after a project that's $1 million or $250,000. We get caught up on the payment process and all that stuff. I like how you took a look at some other cities, and we've done it before, but I think you really blended it in nice so we can kind of go, yeah, we're shooting for that, or we're shooting for that. So yeah, I believe, I appreciate the help, and this was very eye-opening. And again, I like the paint, plant, pave thing too. It'd be very helpful to some of the residents surrounding the downtown and going down to the lake. So.
Thank you. I very much appreciate that. And I think one thing, we wrote it in our book, which, by the way, we gave you, copies of. My business partner and I, having just been in this business for a long time, noticed that some cities, and most cities, actually, the hardest part is the implementation. And one of the things that we love to do with our clients is we like to just help them walk and talk through the business components and decisions of, is this a good idea or a bad idea, and is it a good business decision for the city or not? And it works wonders if you can just get down to the brass tacks. So like I said, you've written all the perfect plans. You've got them. We help cities implement them. We help them go through that hard discussion of how do you do it. So yes, we'd be more than happy to stay at the table as long as you want us.
Yeah, thank you.
Councilmember Matheny again.
Thank you. So I think one of the things I struggle with, is like, because we wear so many hats, right? We're on the city council, we're on DSD, we're on this. So, and I'm always like pinching the pennies. So I think sometimes I fall into the rut on this, like, you don't want to spend the money, right? Like, should we spend the money on there? Do we need to save it? Which I know we need to spend it. The idea is to put it back into the community. And I think Mr. Askew's point was right on target where, I feel like we kind of get pulled in a couple directions, like, okay, we're going to do small businesses and we only do that. And then it's like, oh, no, we should be doing bigger projects. So then we like kind of put the brakes on that and go do something else. And then, so I don't know. I loved all of your ideas. But Mr. Trace brought up the kind of defunct strip malls. That's something we've talked about a couple different times of, like, how do we get this to redevelop? And, we have like one plaza that you can't even park in, and the other plaza you could have hockey tournaments in the parking lot, like nobody's in it, so it's kind of like feast or famine. And then one of the things we had talked about was trying to do a public-private partnership recently with maybe going to one of these plazas and then doing something with food trucks, because, you know, that's like the food truck has been kind of a topic that we've been talking about here. Is there'd be great to have like a place that the food trucks could go. So that's something we always talked about too. And then anything we can do to incentivize commercial development is like always, you know, something that we struggle with. Because like you said, we have tons of houses. It's the commercial we don't have. But yeah, I'm excited by the ideas. I would love to continue to have their help, you know, to kind of implement. Sure.
Well, I too thank you for your very excellent professional presentation. You know, I really liked what you talked about, giving more attention to the alleyways and the side streets. I just think, you know, those are, you know, we've seen what a difference, you know, renovating New York Avenue has made, and it's begun to totally transform our downtown. And I'm really looking forward to phase 2 of Pennsylvania, but I hope that we'll give some real serious consideration to what can we do to help promote, you know, all the little alleyways and side streets that connect to, because I think there's so much potential there. I love the cultural arts things. I think one of the most impressive visits I had, I went to a CRA conference, I think is up in the Daytona area, and we went to a little small town where a private group had purchased this old dilapidated building and had totally dedicated it to the arts, and the CRA from the city had stepped in to help make that possible. And it was just, had become just a cultural center. And it was just an old building that now was being used every day for long hours by all kinds of groups in the community, and people were coming in, setting up shops, selling artistic things and classes. And to me, what the most significant thing about that was the impact that it had on the rest of that blighted downtown area. Little shops were springing up, little restaurants, and what was interesting is the power of the arts. The cultural arts have returned such a significant, have such a significant return on revenue, and so I'd certainly love to see us make sure to do that. I love the signage thing. I think we certainly need to do more with our signage to say, hey, here's St. Cloud, here's what we're doing, here's what's available, here's part, and it communicates our history. I thought that was great. I really liked the parking garage. Not just a sterile parking garage, but a garage that you've taken that and given it that really classy, attractive look. And I love what, you know, they did to that first floor. You made it a center that, you know, created commercial growth. And I really think that's something we certainly need to give some serious consideration to, because, you know, we've seen the growth in our downtown. We've got a real parking problem right now with just a little bit of growth we've had, and it's going to grow exponentially when we, I believe, continue the renovation of Pennsylvania and beyond. So, thank you very much. Mr. Trace.
I kind of would dive a little bit further into that parking garage discussion while we're here. I mean, what kind of funding mechanisms do we have if we don't charge for parking? Because right now there's no meters on the street. There's no incentive for someone to park in the garage other than there's no available spots. I mean, is there? What can we do?
Well, that's a full analysis. I mean, when you look at parking, and you just said something very important. It's great to create a parking problem because it means you're being successful. It's bad to have a parking problem. You have to stay in front of it. So I'm not sure of the current status of what your parking supply and demand is, but that's number one. If you've already done that as a city and you know, it starts there. You know, what's the supply, what's the demand, how many new restaurants are you anticipating, which restaurants, by the way, generate the most traffic. If there's any kind of performing arts, anything where people all come at one time. So that kind of a parking supply-demand analysis has to be done. Second is, you say you need parking, but how much? You have to know exactly how much, where should it be, but not only that, that garage ended up in a specific location, looking a specific way with a lot of analysis. It didn't just come there. You're going to, at a certain point, have to charge for parking. You do. I mean, there's just no question. Now, do you do it only when it's peak Do you do it when you've reached demand? Of course. You don't do it when it's empty. So there's all kinds of variables that go along with funding garages and making sure that they function. The ones in West Palm, we stayed one step ahead. The one in Pompano, that as soon as we built that, we started planning the next one. You think there's not money for it, but there will be money for it if you do that analysis and you figure out who's going to park in it. You have to make sure that there's enough demand before you build it. I'm assuming that part of the demand is going to come from workers. I mean, if you have people that are already working, be it city hall workers, like the one in West Palm that we built, we knew that X amount of the garage was going to be used by city workers. They don't pay for parking, obviously. They're workers. They're coming. They're not there. But at night, the restaurant's open, and the restaurant users and patrons go into the parking garage. So it's really an analysis that has to be done first. Then you look at the revenue options. And it can come from a variety of places. Anything from, your general fund, your CRA. That was funded by the city, the Pompano one. The one in West Palm was funded by the CRA. So it's a thorough analysis you're going to have to do.
Okay, because I don't see the revenue side of it other than, obligating all the CRA funds or something like that. Because what's your ballpark number per space on cost?
Well, it
Without
depends.
without the fancy facade.
Parking garages can range, if it's tilt up and you limit the expenditures on it, $15,000 a space up to $30,000 a space.
Yeah, I was running with 25,000. If we have 100 spaces right now at City Hall on this side of the building, including the slab that everyone parks on, 4-story, 400 spaces, $10 million. I don't see where that's coming from, and then people will still gripe about no parking because it's all in one spot, right? And they have to walk a block and a half, so there's no parking.
And
Parking
the,
is-
and the challenges about charging is that you're going to push everybody out onto the state streets, and they're going to find parking down all the side, because people are like, I'm not paying $3. And then
Yeah,
they
you
have to
don't
go
people
down
$3.
and park, in front of everybody's houses.
It's a challenge. Parking is always a challenge, but you control, people that park where they're not supposed to be parking. You can have code out. You have to manage the system. When I said we created a parking enterprise fund, it wasn't just to keep the money in. We have a structure. We have a parking manager and a parking enterprise analysis fund of managing it. When they do what you just suggested, it's like a balloon. As soon as you do this, people will try to go somewhere else. You can't let that happen. So as part of your parking enterprise fund, you have to manage those things that people will do. But bottom line is these are the hard decisions you make as a government. You are going to have a parking problem. And you don't have enough surface parking. You won't. You'll have to park a garage somewhere. So now's the time to start to figure out where is it, how big is it, where do you put it, how do you fund it, because you're going to get there. It's a part of being successful, but it isn't without a little bit of pain to figure it out.
Yeah, the book, The High Cost of Free Parking, right?
There you go.
That's-
Did you read that?
Yeah. And
Yes.
then, did you have another parking thing, Dave? Or is it something else?
Well, I was just going to say, let's not get too scared up with the parking thing because the bottom can be retail. You can also put part of the city in part of the parking lot. There's some places down in, I think it's Miami, where one of the floors they use it as event space. They took out the pillars in it, and they usually as a nighttime event space. There's another municipality that rents it out and uses it as valet parking for a close restaurant nearby. So there's lots of ways of paying for that. So I just want to keep you, there's a way to getting money generated for these things. Don't let it scare you too much.
And one other thought is there's a lot of vacant commercial or underutilized commercial property. I almost want to put on autopilot some of the strategies of if we do the paint, plant, and pave program, almost have it on autopilot of it's $2,500 to fix a facade. Like we don't even have to talk about it. We just budget and hopefully we get 20, 50 houses a year kind of implementing that strategy. Same thing a little bit with some of the commercial facade in the downtown, but then also maybe it's half acre, someone that owns an acre lot somewhere in the CRA or even in kind of the greater area of what strategies can we have to incentivize them to put something on the ground, build something to where it's not just vacant land tax revenue, it's also, just something better, whether it's development strategies, or development requirements being tweaked or incentives, just something to get it, it's already on the tax roll, but get it actually generating some money for the city.
Yeah, you all are having the perfect dialogue because you're focused on fixing properties that are underutilized. All that means is money. It'll just generate more taxes, and the more money you have, the more ability you have to upgrade properties more, and it feeds on itself. I'm very surprised with the amount of underutilized commercial space here. And that's low-hanging fruit again. You know, that's a good one.
If you can crack that nut,
We just need
I've been trying.
the rent's high enough to then be able to make sense to build something new.
Right.
Right, so it's
Right.
just,
Right.
you know, you gotta kind of ride the wave.
It's getting there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you all have done a good job so far. You've got a really, really nice downtown, and it's just, you've done a great job so far.
Mr. Askew.
Can I ask one more question? So we're kind of split up. It's kind of like Winter Garden. Like there's Winter Garden, you got your downtown waterfront. We're like some other cities. How do you connect? I know part of it's not in the CRA, but how do you connect the two? Because I see future of, you know, some little bit more of activities down there. Maybe you rent a golf cart to people that can enjoy the downtown. Maybe there's something that brings people back and forth. Maybe you rent bicycles, whatever. It's just, I think that's something we have to look for, and I think the multi-use trail will help some of that. But have you ever seen any in your CRA stuff that kind of tied in two separate areas? Because that's...
Absolutely, and I love that you're saying it's one of the reasons why we ventured out of our little scope, because we were looking for your assets. What you could do, the really just back of the napkin kind of thing that you can do, is identify where those things are. And you just said something that's a very interesting little fix. If all of a sudden, let's use your waterfront just for fun. If you have your waterfront district and then you have your downtown, and it can be connected with a little trolley, a little tram, little golf carts, any kind of a system. Now you have this little district where there's something going on, and here's another district where there's something going on. And then you start to identify it with signs and brands and imaging, and it feeds on itself again. So it's not, I don't think there's a CRA that we have that we're not doing that in. That's, you are, actually, that whole section on connectivity wasn't just about connecting in your downtown, it's connecting your assets everywhere. And that's a very important part of it. It wasn't part of this scope, but I touched on it, so I would encourage you to do that.
Yeah, we also have a 100-acre asset that's a little bit farther around the lake. I'm like, it would be great to be able to connect those
Yep.
somehow.
Yep.
But
Yeah, and then
we're getting-
ultimately you have a big scheme where there's districts. You know how cities are districted, and you can usually, if they're done well, you can name them. You know, New York is the most obvious. You know, you go to Soho, you go to Greenwich Village. There's an example. You can do that in your own city. Just identify those assets, make sure the names are consistent, and what happens in those areas is very clearly defined. And then you just have to create the physical connectivity, be it walking, any mode of transportation, wheel.
Can you use, sorry,
Councilmember Thiene.
can you use CRA dollars for trails, bike paths,
If it's in the CRA
if it's in the CRA?
and it's in your plan.
We did
Are
it
we
for the
using
community
CRA
policing.
dollars for Florida Avenue?
No, I don't think so.
Did
Norm-
you say, can we or are we?
Are we?
It's not in the plan right now.
Can we?
For 3 blocks of it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's something.
it's something.
Yeah.
One
Could-
suggestion when we come
Could
back
embellish that area.
with the money, if you're going to spend it, we have to make sure that we're making it. So any money that you spend in the CRA, it has to generate money. That would be the only litmus. If it's just going to do something nice and pretty, then we usually go, Mr. Manager, is there any city money for this? And you look for city money. And if not, CRAs are machines to generate revenue.
So the paint, plant, and pave doesn't really generate dollars?
It does, because what you do, and you don't realize it, I think one of you said it, it feeds on itself. You know, the one will do it, but then somebody else will do it, and then the values will start to go up. Then the next time a house sells, it sells for more. Then you have comparables that are higher, and it all
Yeah.
feeds on itself.
I'm not the worst yard in the neighborhood. I might be second worst, but, you know, I just stay one step ahead of the worst yard. That's the... and then just to give a little thought for everyone, because Dave brought up Winter Garden, their splash pad, if you've ever seen that, it's kind of like elevated little splash pad things on a 1/4 acre. Their farmer's market building and little plaza is on a 1 acre piece. Their parking garage, which is huge, is on a 2 acre piece. and their lakefront, just like ours, is kind of separated from downtown. And our lakefront is kind of spread out, but really nice linear. Theirs is only 7 acres. And the Plant Street Market with Crooked Can Brewing and all the little food hall stuff is only on a 1 acre piece. And they utilize pretty much the parking lot of City Hall. So just kind of some general sizes of things. So I think we've got a lot of assets that the city owns or other pieces of property that could just become some of those little nuggets that help create that downtown.
Oh, the trail runs through.
Stuart, do you have anything?
No,
All right.
I'm good. I'm excited.
Well, thank you very much. Does anyone in the audience would like to share a public comment at this point? If not, are you done?
I am, sir.
Well, thank you. You've done an excellent job. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I've enjoyed your company very much. You've got a great CRA going. I'm
So we look forward to working with you.
best to.
We're down to our information area. Our next CR meeting will be Thursday, August the 5th. And with that, there's nothing else on our agenda. We will be adjourned.